Good morning, class. I welcome you all back to the online classes for English for class 10th. And in the previous session, I hope all of you remember that we started with chapter 3, two stories about flying, and we have already discussed the first story that was entitled as His First Flight. Do you remember that story? Yes, the story of the little seagull. So now today we are going to continue with the same chapter, two stories about flying, and we'll be discussing the second story, the story entitled as The Black Aeroplane. And this story is written by Frederick Fawcett. As usual, we'll begin with a brief introduction of the author. Frederick Fawcett is an English author, journalist, and occasional political commentator. So it's very clear that he's a journalist and his area of interest is political arena, right? He is best known for thrillers. Now I hope all of you know what thrillers are. Yes? Thrillers are suspense stories that have a lot of mysterious elements involved in that. Element of mystery is there, and that keeps on the readers or the viewers, if it is a film or something like that, they keep the readers interested in them. They keep their excitement levels high and they keep you thrilled. That is why they are known as thrillers. So Frederick Fawcett is best known for thrillers. Many of his bestsellers are now film adaptations. Now you can understand the level, the achievement, the popularity of this writer, that many of his bestsellers have been turned into films. The theme of the story. Now we are going to discuss a little bit about the present story, that is The Black Aeroplane. The theme of the story is, it's like not very clear. Actually, the theme is about the self-confidence, trust on self, right? Self-reliance, what you call as. So the story oscillates or shifts between miracle and mystery. So there's element of miracle as well as mystery in the story. It keeps you engaged. It keeps you interested till you read to the last word in the story. An insight into the story. So it's about the story, an introduction to the story. The story tells how the narrator was stuck in the storm and he became helpless. At that time, he saw a black aeroplane which had no lights, and he saw that the pilot was trying to help him. He landed safely, searched for the pilot of the black aeroplane. He got to know that there was no other plane flying in the sky that particular night. And so this black aeroplane remained a mystery till end of this story. So that was a little introduction, a brief introduction of the story. Now we'll be reading the text and discuss it. The moon was coming up in the east behind me, and stars were shining in the clear sky above me. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I was happy to be alone, high up above the sleeping countryside. I was flying my old Dakota aeroplane over France back to England. So, the story begins with a description of the sky. The moon was coming up in the east. So, it was evening, late evening, and stars were shining in the clear sky. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. Now, this sentence very clearly states that it was a cloudless night. Cloudless night means it was a clear sky, and there seemed no hurdle in carrying out the flight. I was happy to be alone, high up above the sleeping countryside. Sleeping countryside. This is another phrase that suggests that the author is describing an event that took place in the night. I was flying my old Dakota aeroplane over France back to England. So, Dakota are a particular type of planes, a military transport aircraft. They are used for transportation, right, by military, by army, transportation of soldiers maybe, or equipments or whatever it is. So it's basically a transport aircraft. So the narrator says that he was flying back from France to England. I was dreaming of my holiday and looking forward to being with my family. Now, this line clearly shows that he was going to his home and he was extremely happy about that. I looked at my watch, 1:30 in the morning. So it was beyond midnight now. I should call Paris control soon, I thought. As I looked down past the nose of the aeroplane, I saw the lights of a big city in front of me. I switched on the radio and said, Paris control, Dakota DS 088 here. Can you hear me? So, while he was flying over the city of Paris, he contacted the Paris control room and he informed about his flight, and he also inquired about something. Can you hear me? I'm on my way to England. Over. So he informs Paris control room that he's flying this particular plane, Dakota DS 088, and he's on his way to England. The voice from the radio answered me immediately. DS 088, I can hear you. You ought to turn 12 degrees west now. DS 088, over. So the Paris control room responded positively and they told him to take the direction he should to reach England. I checked the map and the compass, switched over to my second and last fuel tank, and turned the Dakota 12 degrees west towards England. Now see, look at this phrase. Switched over to my second and last fuel tank. This phrase clearly suggests that he had very limited fuel in the fuel tank of his plane, right? I'll be in time for breakfast, I thought. A good big English breakfast. Everything was going well. It was an easy flight. He was very happy. The first reason was he's going back home, and second reason was he was very sure that he'll be able to reach well in time to his home and he'll be having to have breakfast with his family. Paris was about 150 kilometers behind me when I saw the clouds. Now, in the previous paragraph we just read, the last phrase says it was an easy flight. The conditions were very normal. There seemed no problem. There seemed no hurdle in the flight. But as he crossed about 150 kilometers from Paris, as he flew about 150 kilometers from Paris, he saw the clouds. Suddenly, he saw a big mountain of clouds. They were huge. So, it was like the cloud appeared to be stormy. They looked like black mountains standing in front of me across the sky. So what he could see before his eyes, huge dark clouds covering the sky. I knew I could not fly up and over them, and I did not have enough fuel to fly around them to the north or south. Now the pilot had very clear idea that he wouldn't be able to fly over them, right? Fly up and over them. He couldn't cross them like that. He also says that he did not have enough fuel in his tank to fly, to take a longer route. I ought to go back to Paris. So the first thought that appeared in the mind of the author, the narrator, is that he should go back to Paris. That was the safest option actually. But I wanted to get home. But the idea of getting home overpowered his uh, decision of going back to Paris. I wanted that breakfast. I'll take the risk, I thought, and flew that old Dakota straight into the storm. Now, his desire, his urge to reach home and have breakfast with his family was so strong that he dismissed the idea of going back to Paris, and he decided that he will take the risk and flew through that huge a huge mountain of clouds. Now in this slide you can see the pictures of compass word appeared here. Compass is an instrument that helps you to get the idea about directions. So this first, both the pictures actually are compass that are there on the cockpit of the plane, right? Inside the clouds, everything was suddenly black. Now he took the risk of entering into the clouds. Everything was suddenly black. The clouds were so dense, so dark that he could see nothing. Visibility was zero. It was impossible to see anything outside the aeroplane, so he couldn't see anything around him. The old aeroplane jumped and twisted in the air, so it started disbalance. It was very difficult to keep it moving straight. I looked at the compass. I couldn't believe my eyes. The compass was turning round and round and round. It was dead. It would not work. The other instruments were suddenly dead too. I tried the radio. Now, not only this, that he was surrounded by dark clouds and he couldn't see anything. His problems were on rise, right? The next thing that came to his shock, that he was shocked to see, was that the compass was dead. It did not work, it didn't show any direction at all, and even the radio and other instruments in the aeroplane were all dead. Nothing was working. Paris control, can you hear me? There was no answer. He tried to contact Paris control room again, but there was no response. The radio was dead too. So soon he realized that the radio was dead too. It was also dead. I had no radio, no compass, and I could not see where I was. I was lost in the storm. Now, imagine the situation, the terrible situation the narrator finds himself in. He is flying. Suddenly, he enters into a huge mountain of dark clouds, and as soon as he gets inside, his visibility becomes zero. He couldn't see anything out of the aeroplane. Moreover, all the controls in the aeroplane, they suddenly went dead. Then in the black clouds quite near me, I saw another aeroplane. It had no lights on its wing, but I could see it flying next to me through the storm. Now suddenly he noticed something unexpected. What was it? Yes, it was another aeroplane. He saw another aeroplane by the side of his plane. He could see it was an aeroplane, but he couldn't see any lights on the wings. But it was flying next to the old Dakota flown by the narrator. I could see the pilot's face turned towards me. I was very glad to see another person. So the narrator says he could see the pilot sitting in the other plane, right? And he was very happy. He felt relieved actually to see another person in that situation. He lifted one hand and waved. "Follow me," he was saying. "Follow me." Now the pilot of the other plane, he waved towards the narrator and asked him to follow him. He knows that I'm lost, I thought. He's trying to help me. And the only thing that the narrator could think of was the helping attitude of this pilot of the other plane. He thinks that the other pilot knows that the narrator is lost and he's trying to help him. He turned his aeroplane slowly to the north in front of my Dakota so that it would be easier for me to follow him. Now, see, narrator realizes one thing, that the pilot of the other plane was careful enough to lead the narrator to the right direction out of those dark clouds. I was very happy to go behind the strange aeroplane like an obedient child. Now, this here a simile is employed. Look at these words, like an obedient child. So, in simile, as we have discussed in the poems earlier, we compare two things or two persons. So, what is the comparison made here? I was very happy to go behind the strange aeroplane like an obedient child. I is compared to an obedient child. So the narrator here is compared to an obedient child. And why? Because he follows the other plane. After half an hour, the strange black aeroplane was still there in front of me in the clouds. Now half an hour passed and he could still see that strange black aeroplane. Why is it called strange? Because maybe the narrator had not seen such an aeroplane before in his life, or maybe because he doesn't know anything about that particular aeroplane. Now there was only enough fuel in the old Dakota's last tank to fly for 5 or 10 minutes more. And what was the thing that worried the narrator at this moment was that he did not have much fuel to fly for longer. It would be only for another, say, 10 minutes that he would be able to fly in that plane. I was starting to feel frightened again, but then he started to go down and I followed through the storm. Yes. Now, as the narrator thought of the fuel in his aeroplane, he started worrying. Of course, he was worried because he was deep inside the black clouds. There was no way outside, right? And he didn't know where to go. Moreover, he didn't have enough fuel. But then he started to go down and I followed through the storm. Suddenly, I came out of the clouds and saw two long straight lines of lights in front of me. It was a runway, an airport. I was safe. Yes. So, as soon as he had that frightening thought in his mind, as soon as he thought about the fuel that was left in the fuel tank of his aeroplane, his Dakota, he suddenly realized one thing, that suddenly the strange plane started going down. The narrator followed, and what he saw was that he could see a runway very close to them. So presence of a runway suggests that there was an an airport nearby, right? Now, what is a runway? Runway is a strip of hard ground along with aircraft takes off and lands. So runway is that part before taking the flight off, right? So the aeroplane has to run on the runway with a speed, and after a little running on the runway, it takes a flight off. I turned to look for my friend in the black aeroplane, but the sky was empty. There was nothing there. The black aeroplane was gone. I could not see it anywhere. Now, the first thought that the writer had in his mind was, when he saw the runway, was he was extremely happy. Look at the exclamatory marks used here. It was a runway, an airport. I was safe. So he couldn't believe that actually he was out of danger. And the second thought was looking for the strange black aeroplane whose pilot had helped me, helped him, guided him in moving out of that dangerous situation. But he couldn't see it anywhere. That strange black aeroplane was nowhere to be seen. I landed and was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota near the control tower. Not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota means he was extremely happy actually. This is what he suggests, what this line suggests, what he means to say, right? He was very happy to have landed and he moves towards the control tower. I went and asked a woman in the control center where I was and who the other pilot was. I wanted to say thank you. Now she inquired from one of the people, a woman in the control tower, about the place where he was presently and about the other plane. She looked at me very strangely and then laughed. Another aeroplane? Up there in this storm? No other aeroplanes were flying tonight. Yours was the only one I could see on the radar. Yes. So, the woman tells him an astonishing thing, something he couldn't believe actually, right? She looks at him strangely. Why? Because the question was, who was that other plane flying, or who is flying that other plane in the sky? But actually, in the knowledge of the woman, there was no other there was no other plane flying that particular night, and the only reason was the stormy weather conditions. She informs the narrator that his was the only plane she could see on the radar. Now, what is a radar? Radar is a system that detects the presence, direction, distance and speed of aircraft, ships and other objects, right? And how do they do that? By sending out pulses of radio waves, right? Okay. So she says, yours was the only place I could detect on the radar. So who helped me to arrive there safely without a compass or a radio and without any more fuel in my tanks? Who was the pilot on the strange black aeroplane, flying in the storm without lights? Now, when the narrator learns that there was no any other plane flying in the sky that particular night except for his own, he was puzzled actually. We just read that he followed a particular black aeroplane with no lights on its wings, and that strange black aeroplane helped him to reach to that place where he was. It helped him, it guided him to land safely, securely on the runway there. It showed him that particular runway, right? But now the person at the control tower was saying that there was no other plane flying. So this puzzles the narrator. He gets confused. And a question keeps on lingering in his mind. That question keeps on coming again and again. So the question was, if there was no any plane flying that particular night, who was that who helped me to reach this place without a compass or a radio? He didn't have any radio or compass working in his plane. We have read about it. And he had very limited fuel as well. Had it been more than 10 minutes after spending half an hour inside the dark clouds, he could have never reached safely, right? He could have never landed safely. So he was thankful to the other plane, to the pilot of the other plane. But now the reply of the woman in the control tower leaves him confused. He doesn't know and wants to know who was the pilot on the strange black aeroplane flying in the storm without lights. So the story ends here with this question: not only in the mind of the narrator but also in the minds of the readers. So we call such stories as open-ended stories, right? Story keeps you, this is the mystery, the element of mystery in this particular story. The black aeroplane, the title talks about that black aeroplane which actually did not exist. So here the story ends. I hope this story is clear to you. The main focus of the story is the situation. First thing is the situation in which the narrator finds himself. The frightful situation, frightening situation. His plane caught in stormy dark clouds with no visibility in the surroundings, right? And second was he could see a black aeroplane helping him out, but when he inquires about it, he was told that there was no other plane flying in the sky that particular night. So these two things are the points of focus in the story. Let's discuss a few questions for comprehension check. And remember, you will be doing these questions in your notebooks. First question is, I'll take the risk. What is the risk? Why does the narrator take it? So what risk is being talked about in this particular line? The risk of entering into the dark clouds. And why does the narrator take it? The narrator takes it because his desire, his wish to reach England, his home, was overpowering him, right? So he wanted to reach home at any cost. That is why he decides to take the risk. Next question. Describe the narrator's experience as he flew the aeroplane into the storm. Now here, this is a descriptive question. You have to write about what he experienced once he entered into the storm, the dark clouds. So first thing would be, as soon as he entered into the storm, visibility becomes zero. He couldn't see anything out of the aeroplane, right? Secondly, he soon realized that all the controls went dead. His compass, the radio and other controls in the aeroplane, they went dead. He couldn't contact anyone. And he had already realized that he was the only one caught in that storm. Then one more worrying thing was that he was left with very little fuel in the last fuel tank of his old Dakota, right? So he had gone blank. He didn't know what to do. Then suddenly he notices another aeroplane and follows it, right? And is able to reach safely, is able to land safely with the help of that old Dakota. These are the key points to this answer. You have to write a proper description covering all these points. Now next question is, what made the woman in the control center look at the narrator strangely? So when the narrator reaches safely, when he lands safely and goes to the control room, the woman in the control center looks at him strangely because he asks about another aeroplane, and the woman says she had not noticed, she could not detect any other plane flying in the sky that particular night except for the old Dakota flown by the narrator. Who do you think helped the narrator to reach safely? Give reasons for your answer. Now this is a question that you have to answer on the basis of your thoughts and your imagination, right? When we read the story initially, we understand that the narrator was helped by the pilot of a strange black aeroplane to reach safely, right? But towards the end of the story, this thought is nullified. It is proved to be wrong. Why? Because the narrator was told by the woman that there was no other aeroplane flying in the sky that particular night. So, who was it actually who helped the narrator? See, maybe it was the narrator himself. He was a good pilot, he was an experienced pilot. He might have experienced similar situation somewhere in the past. He had been flying for years, right? So, his own knowledge, his own experience might have helped him. But the thing is that he visualized his own self as another person who helped him in such situation. Otherwise, there is no logical reason we can give for this particular question. Last question, which is a bit longer, is which two options did the pilot of the Dakota plane have when he encountered the storm clouds on his way? So the two options were either to go through the clouds, to fly through the clouds, or to go back to the Paris. So what did he decide to do and why? So which option did he choose? He chose the option of flying through the storm. Why? Because he wanted to reach home as early as possible, right? His urge, his wish, his desire to reach home and have breakfast with his family was so strong that it overpowered his sense of thinking any further. It overpowered his wisdom for the moment, and he decides to fly through the clouds. So that's all for today's class, children. Hope the story is clear to you and the questions we have already discussed. You are clear with the key points of these questions. You have to rephrase the answers in your words, of course, in your language. So let me tell you what questions you have to write. First 3 questions you will be writing in the classwork section, and question number 4 and 5 in the homework section of your notebooks. Do keep your work updated, because you have to submit your assignments as well whenever you are asked to. So stay home, stay safe, have a good day.